The morning had barely begun, yet the atmosphere inside the office was already thick with disdain. She walked in quietly, clutching her worn handbag, her simple dress a stark contrast to the polished heels and sharp suits around her. Heads turned, not in admiration but in mockery, disguised as amusement. A group near the coffee machine whispered, casting glances her way. She could hear the faint echoes of their laughter, sharp as needles against her fragile confidence. As she approached her desk, a senior colleague called out loudly, handing her a stack of heavy files with a smirk. "Since you have nothing better to do," he sneered, drawing chuckles from the others. She accepted the burden without a word, her hands trembling slightly as she balanced the pile. Every step back to her desk felt heavier, not because of the files, but because of the weight of humiliation pressing down on her. Another co-worker accidentally spilled coffee near her workspace, then mockingly apologized, making a show of wiping it with exaggerated gestures while others watched and grinned. She knelt to clean the mess herself, feeling their eyes burn into her back. Her cheeks burned with shame, but she blinked back the tears, threatening to escape. She needed this job. She had promised herself she would endure whatever it took. As the laughter behind her grew louder, she bit her lips so hard it nearly bled, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Unseen, unnoticed by them, the door to the office eased open, and a figure stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding her in the crowd of mockery. The luxury black car pulled up quietly outside the towering office building, its windows tinted, shielding the man inside. He sat still for a moment, his sharp eyes observing through the glass, his face unreadable. With a slow, deliberate movement, he stepped out, his polished shoes clicking lightly against the pavement. He adjusted his cufflinks, his tailored suit catching the morning light, exuding an aura of silent power. As he entered the lobby, the receptionist glanced up, startled by his commanding presence, but before she could stammer a greeting, he had already moved past her. Without a word, he rode the elevator up, the air inside seeming to tighten with each passing floor. When the doors slid open, he stepped into the office space, his arrival almost unnoticed at first, amid the commotion. He stood by the entrance, still, almost blending into the shadows. His gaze swept the room, sharp and calculating, capturing every sneer, every careless laugh directed at her. He saw her struggling with the heavy files. He saw the deliberate coffee spill, the whispered jokes. His hands clenched at his sides for a moment, the only crack in his controlled demeanor. No one knew who he was. To them, he was just another businessman, perhaps a client or a visitor, but he watched unseen, his heart aching at her humiliation, rage simmering just beneath the surface. He made no move yet. He wanted to see it all, to know exactly who would answer for this. His expression remained stone cold, his presence unnoticed by the tormentors, too engrossed in their cruelty. The seconds dragged on, stretching into a heavy, tense silence inside him, as he planned his next move with chilling precision. Without warning, he moved forward, each step measured and deliberate, cutting through the noise of laughter like a blade. Conversations faltered, and heads turned one by one, confusion blooming on every face. The woman, still kneeling on the floor with tissues in her hand, froze as a shadow fell over her. Slowly she looked up, her eyes widening in shock as she met his gaze. There was no anger in his eyes for her, only a deep, fierce love burning bright. Without a word, he bent down and gently took her hand, lifting her to her feet with a tenderness that silenced the room completely. A heavy, suffocating stillness fell over the office. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his thumb lingering against her cheek as if to erase the pain she had endured. Then he turned, standing tall, his presence filling the space with an undeniable authority. His voice, when it came, was calm, steady, yet carrying an undercurrent of power that made everyone shiver. "This woman," he said, his arm protectively around her, "is my wife." A gasp rippled through the room, some faces draining of color, others blinking in disbelief. He let the words sink in, his gaze sharp and unforgiving as it moved from one stunned face to another. And today, every single person who thought they could disrespect her will face the consequences. No one dared to move, no one dared to speak. The woman, still gripping his hand, felt a tremor run through her body, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else, relief, safety, and a fierce swell of pride. He tightened his grip slightly, anchoring her to him, letting the room know that she was no longer alone, that she would never again be humiliated while he stood breathing. The storm had arrived, and it wore a tailored suit and a gaze colder than winter. The silence in the office was deafening, the air thick with fear and regret. One by one, the guilty parties dropped their gazes, unable to withstand the force of his stare. He remained still for a long moment, his arm still around his wife, his presence suffocating to those who had mocked her minutes before. Then, in a voice that was low but carried to every corner of the room, he spoke again. "You're all fired," he said, enunciating each word slowly, clearly, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Gasps and desperate murmurs broke out instantly. Some tried to plead, others stumbled forward with shaky apologies, but he simply raised a hand, silencing them without effort. His wife, overwhelmed, could only watch as the same people who had laughed at her now looked at her with wide, pleading eyes. The irony twisted painfully in her chest, but she stood tall, strengthened by the unwavering support at her side. Security personnel, summoned silently by a gesture moments earlier, entered the office. One by one, the mocking faces turned desperate as they were escorted out, their protests falling on deaf ears. The man didn't spare them another glance. Instead, he turned to his wife, his expression softening in an instant, as if the coldness he wore for others melted away the moment his eyes found hers. He gently guided her forward, past the stunned remaining staff who had not participated, but had silently watched her suffer. Stopping at the manager's office, he opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "From now on," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "this office belongs to you. You will lead it with the respect you deserve." She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks now, but this time they were not born of humiliation. They were tears of pride, gratitude, and overwhelming love. The remaining employees stood rooted, a mix of awe and fear written across their faces. No one dared to question it. No one dared to underestimate her ever again. As she stepped into the office, her husband behind her like a silent shield, the simple woman they had once mocked had now become a symbol of resilience and quiet strength, crowned not by wealth, but by the fierce love of the man who had seen her worth when no one else did.